You can know someone is no longer right for your peace and still find yourself returning to them in your mind, not because you are weak, not because you have no self-respect, and not because the past was perfect, but because the mind often stays loyal to what the heart has repeated too many times. It goes back to the same memory, the same conversation, the same unfinished feeling, as if thinking about it one more time might finally make the pain make sense. This is where many people begin to lose themselves. Not only when someone leaves, or becomes distant, or stops choosing them, but in what happens afterward. The private replay, the checking, the imagined conversations, the quiet hope that something will change, the need to understand why it happened, what it meant, whether they cared, whether they regret it, whether you mattered as much as they mattered to you. And slowly, without noticing, your attention becomes tied to someone who may no longer be present in your life. You wake up and they are there. You try to focus and they return. You see a place, hear a song, touch an old memory, and suddenly your whole nervous system is pulled backward. The world keeps moving, but inside, part of you is still standing in the same emotional room, waiting for an answer that may never come. The painful truth is that missing someone does not always mean they belong in your future. Sometimes it means your mind has not yet learned how to stop reaching for what once felt familiar. Sometimes it means your nervous system is still attached to the pattern, not the person. And sometimes what you call love is really the mind trying to complete an unfinished story. Ancient wisdom understood that we suffer deeply when we give our peace to what we cannot control. But psychology adds another layer. The mind does not only remember the past, it rehearses it, strengthens it, and turns it into identity when we keep feeding it with attention. This is how a person becomes more than a person. They become a symbol, a wound, a question, a mirror you keep looking into, hoping to find your worth. But your worth cannot be recovered from someone else's silence. Healing does not mean pretending they never mattered. It does not mean becoming cold, bitter, or emotionally numb. It means learning to stop abandoning yourself in the name of what you miss. It means separating love from attachment, memory from reality, and pain from identity. It means understanding that you can care deeply about someone and still refuse to let their absence become the center of your life. Because your life cannot become a shrine to someone who is no longer walking with you. They may have mattered. They may have changed you. They may have awakened something real in you, but they do not get to define the rest of you. In this episode, we will walk through 10 lessons in detachment, emotional discipline, and self-mastery to help you stop thinking about someone in a way that destroys your peace and begin returning to the one person you still have a responsibility to protect: yourself. 1. Stop feeding the thought loop. The first thing to understand is that a thought is not powerful simply because it appears. It becomes powerful when you keep giving it attention, emotion, and imagination. A memory can arrive without your permission. You hear a song, pass a place, see a name, wake up in the middle of the night, and suddenly they are there again. Their face, their voice, the last conversation. The version of them you still miss. The version of yourself that existed when they were close. That first moment is not the problem. The problem begins when the mind takes the memory and starts building a world around it. You do not only remember them, you enter the memory. You replay what happened, then adjust it. You imagine what you should have said. You wonder what they are doing now. You picture them regretting it, or missing you, or moving on without difficulty. Then one thought becomes 10 thoughts, and 10 thoughts become an emotional storm that changes your mood, your focus, your body, and your entire day. This is how attachment survives after distance. The person may no longer be present, but your attention keeps giving them life inside you. And attention is not passive. Attention is fuel. Whatever you return to repeatedly begins to grow stronger in the nervous system. The mind learns the path by walking it. Every time you revisit the same scene, the path becomes easier to find again. Modern psychology calls this rumination. Ancient wisdom understood it as being carried away by impressions. A thought appears, and instead of observing it, you follow it. You let it decide where your mind goes next. You let it pull you out of the present and back into a story that cannot be changed by thinking harder. This is why so many people feel exhausted after a relationship, even when nothing new has happened. The body is living in the present, but the mind is still negotiating with the past. It keeps returning to the same emotional room, searching for a door that may not exist. And the cruel part is that rumination often feels productive. It feels like you are trying to understand. It feels like you are getting closer to closure. But most of the time, you are not solving the pain. You are rehearsing it. You are training your mind to associate their memory with urgency, longing, regret, and fear. There is a difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection teaches you something and returns you to life. Rumination keeps circling the same wound and calls the circle insight. Reflection brings clarity. Rumination creates dependency. Reflection says, "What can I learn?" Rumination says, "Let me suffer this again, in case suffering reveals the answer." That distinction matters. You are not trying to erase the person from your mind. That is usually impossible, especially when the connection mattered. You are trying to stop turning every thought of them into a ritual. You are trying to stop giving every memory the authority to interrupt your peace. The way forward is not to fight the thought aggressively. Fighting often gives it more power. When you say, "I must not think about them," the mind hears their name even louder. Resistance can become another form of attachment because you're still organizing your inner life around the same person. A calmer approach is stronger. When the thought appears, notice it without obeying it. Something simple inside you can say, "This is the loop." Not with panic, not with shame, just recognition. This is the mind reaching for the familiar. This is the old story trying to restart. This is not a command. It is only a thought. That small distance is where freedom begins. You may not control the arrival of the memory, but you can begin to control the amount of life you give it. You can choose not to open the old conversation. You can choose not to imagine their side of the story for the 100th time. You can choose not to spend another hour trying to extract meaning from someone's absence. At first, this will feel almost unnatural because pain can become familiar. The mind often returns to what it knows, even when what it knows hurts. A familiar wound can feel safer than an unfamiliar freedom. At least in the wound you know who you are. You are the one waiting, missing, explaining, hoping. Freedom asks you to become someone else, someone who no longer builds their day around what another person did or did not do. That is why this lesson requires patience. You will not break the loop by winning one dramatic battle. You break it through small returns. You return to your breath. You return to your work. You return to the room you are in. You return to the person you are becoming. Not perfectly, but repeatedly. And each return matters. Every time you refuse to follow the memory all the way down, you weaken the chain a little. Every time you come back to the present, you remind your mind that home is not the past. Home is not their attention. Home is not the version of the story where they finally understand. Home is your own life, waiting for you to inhabit it again. This is not coldness, it is not denial, it is not pretending they meant nothing. It is simply refusing to keep feeding what is feeding on you. One day the thought may still come, but it will not take your whole nervous system with it. Their name may pass through your mind without becoming an event. The memory may appear, but it will no longer become a place where you disappear. That is real progress. Not forgetting, not becoming hard, not proving you never cared. Just learning, slowly and with dignity, that a thought can visit without becoming your home. 2. Stop checking what keeps reopening the wound. Some pain does not stay alive because the person keeps hurting you. It stays alive because you keep returning to the places where the hurt is waiting. You check their profile. You look at an old photo. You reread a message that used to make you feel close to them. You notice whether they are online, whether they posted, whether they seem happy, whether someone new is near them. And in the moment, it can feel harmless. Just one look, just one small check, just a way to know. But the nervous system does not experience it as harmless. It experiences it as contact. Even if you do not speak to them, checking keeps a thin emotional wire between you and them. It gives your mind new material to analyze, new images to interpret, new silence to explain, new pain to build a story around. You may think you are gathering information, but often you are only reopening the wound in a quieter form. This is why you can feel fine for a few hours, maybe even a few days, and then one small look pulls you back into the same emotional state. Your body drops, your thoughts speed up, your imagination begins working against you. A simple photo becomes evidence, a song becomes a message, a smile becomes betrayal, a lack of activity becomes mystery. You are no longer looking at reality clearly, you are looking through attachment. And attachment is not a neutral observer. It will take the smallest fragment and turn it into a whole story. If they seem happy, the mind may say, they never cared. If they seem sad, the mind may say, maybe they miss me. If they are silent, the mind may say, maybe something is happening. In every direction, the same thing happens. Your attention leaves your life and enters theirs. That is the real cost. Checking does not only hurt because of what you might find, it hurts because of what it trains you to do. It trains you to measure your peace by someone else's movement. It teaches your mind that their life still deserves surveillance. It keeps you emotionally available to a person you may be trying to heal from. And this is where discipline becomes a form of self-respect. Not dramatic discipline, not punishment, not hatred. Just the quiet decision to stop placing your healing in front of triggers and calling it strength. There is nothing noble about keeping every doorway open if those doorways keep leading you back into pain. Sometimes maturity is not proving you can look and remain unaffected. Sometimes maturity is admitting, this still affects me, so I will protect myself until it no longer controls me. That honesty matters. A lot of people resist this because deleting, muting, unfollowing, or removing reminders feels too final. It feels like losing the last thread. But ask yourself seriously, is that thread connecting you to love? Or is it connecting you to withdrawal? Is it giving you peace? Or is it giving you another reason to think about them for the rest of the day? The answer is usually clear, even when it is uncomfortable. Buddhism speaks about craving as the movement of the mind that reaches for relief and creates more suffering. Checking often works exactly like that. You feel the discomfort of not knowing, so you reach for a little contact. For a second, the mind feels fed. Then the emptiness returns stronger than before. So you reach again. And each time you reach, the habit becomes more convincing. The problem is not that you care. The problem is that your caring has lost its boundary. You can care about someone and still refuse to monitor them. You can miss someone and still decide not to study their life from a distance. You can have love in your heart and still understand that love is not a reason to keep injuring your peace. This is the point many people miss. Distance is not always rejection. Sometimes distance is medicine. It gives the mind time to stop reacting. It gives the body time to calm down. It gives the heart a chance to remember that life exists beyond one person's name. So make healing practical. Remove what keeps pulling you back. Archive the messages if you are not ready to delete them, but stop rereading them every night. Mute what you keep checking. Avoid asking mutual friends for updates. Do not turn social media into a window you stand in front of, watching someone else live while your own life waits behind you. This may feel small, but small openings are how the past keeps entering. At first, the urge to check will still come. Let it come. Do not panic. Do not shame yourself. Just pause long enough to see it for what it is. An urge is not an instruction. It is only energy moving through the body. If you do not obey it, it rises, peaks, and begins to pass. That is how control returns. Not by never wanting to look, but by no longer letting the desire decide for you. Every time you refuse to check, you are not losing them again. You are choosing yourself again. You are teaching your mind that your peace matters more than one more piece of information. You are breaking the habit of using pain as a way to feel close. And eventually, something changes. Their life stops feeling like a place you need to watch. Their silence stops feeling like a puzzle you need to solve. Their happiness stops feeling like an insult. Their absence stops becoming daily news inside your mind. That is the lesson. Stop checking what keeps reopening the wound. Not because the past meant nothing, but because your future needs protection. You cannot keep touching the same sharp edge and wonder why you are still bleeding. 3. Separate reality from the story. Your mind keeps writing. One of the most painful traps of attachment is that the mind does not only remember what happened, it keeps adding meaning to it. There is the event itself, and then there is the story your pain builds around the event. The event may be simple, even if it hurts. They stopped reaching out. They became distant. They chose someone else. They left without explaining enough, or they did not love you in the way you hoped. That is reality. It may be painful, unfair, and disappointing, but it is still reality. The story begins afterward. The story says, maybe I was not enough. It says, maybe they never cared. It says, maybe I ruined everything. It says, maybe if I had been calmer, more attractive, more patient, more interesting, or more successful, they would have stayed. And before you realize it, you are no longer suffering only because someone is gone. You are suffering because your mind has turned their absence into a judgment against your entire self. That is where the wound becomes heavier than the event. Because now you are not just missing them, you are using them as evidence. Their silence becomes evidence that you were easy to forget. Their distance becomes evidence that you were not worth choosing. Their coldness becomes evidence that your love was foolish. Their ability to move on becomes evidence that what you felt meant nothing. But pain is not always a reliable narrator. When the mind is hurt, it tries to create certainty. It wants a clean explanation because uncertainty feels unbearable, and sometimes it would rather believe a painful explanation than live with no explanation at all. I was not enough hurts, but at least it feels like an answer. I do not fully know why this happened is harder because it leaves the heart standing in an unfinished room. This is why you must slow the mind down. Do not let it turn every unknown into a verdict. Do not let it take one person's behavior and use it to define your whole identity. Someone can leave for reasons that have more to do with their limits than your worth. Someone can be inconsistent because they are confused, immature, afraid, avoidant, selfish, wounded, or simply not capable of loving steadily. None of that automatically means you were unlovable. It means the connection did not become what you needed it to become. That difference is not small. It is the difference between grief and self-destruction. Grief says, "This mattered, and it hurts that it ended." Self-destruction says, "This ended because something is wrong with me." Grief allows you to feel the loss. Self-destruction turns the loss into shame. And shame is dangerous because it does not teach you clearly. It makes you desperate. It makes you want to return to the person who hurt you. Not always because they are good for you, but because you want them to cancel the story your mind has created. If they come back, maybe I mattered. If they apologize, maybe I was not crazy. If they miss me, maybe I was enough. That is a fragile way to live. Your identity cannot depend on someone else giving you a kinder interpretation of your pain. You have to become strong enough to examine your own thoughts, especially the ones that feel true because they hurt. Modern psychology calls this cognitive fusion, when you become so attached to a thought that you forget it is only a thought. They left becomes, "I am worthless." They changed becomes, "I was never important." They stopped choosing me becomes, "No one will ever choose me." The mind moves from fact to prophecy so quickly that you do not notice the leap. But you can learn to notice it. Instead of saying, "They left because I was not enough," say, "They left and my mind is telling me I was not enough." That small change creates space. It does not remove the pain, but it weakens the spell. You are no longer inside the thought. You are looking at it. And once you can look at a thought, you are not fully owned by it. This is where emotional discipline becomes quiet and practical. You begin asking better questions. What do I actually know? What am I assuming? What am I adding because I am afraid? What part of this story comes from the present? And what part comes from old wounds I have carried for years? Jung understood that when we do not know the full truth, the unconscious often fills the empty spaces. If you already fear abandonment, silence will feel like proof that everyone leaves. If you already fear being replaceable, seeing someone move on will feel like proof that you meant nothing. If you already fear not being enough, one person's rejection can feel like the universe confirming your deepest insecurity. But that does not make the story true. It means the situation has touched something old. This is why healing requires more than blaming the other person. It also requires noticing what the experience awakened in you. Maybe the pain is not only about losing them. Maybe it is also about the part of you that has always feared being left. Maybe it is about the part of you that tries to earn love by overgiving. Maybe it is about the part of you that confuses inconsistency with intensity because calm love feels unfamiliar. That kind of honesty is not comfortable, but it is powerful. It stops you from making the other person the entire explanation for your suffering. Yes, they may have hurt you. Yes, they may have been careless. Yes, they may have failed to meet you with maturity. But if you only focus on them, you miss the deeper work, learning why your mind turned their behavior into a story about your worth. And once you see the story, you can begin to rewrite your relationship with it, not by lying to yourself, not by pretending everything was fine, but by becoming more loyal to truth than to pain. The truth might be that you cared deeply for someone who could not meet you fully. It might be that you ignored signs because the potential felt more beautiful than the reality. It might be that you made mistakes, but those mistakes do not make you unworthy of love. It might be that the ending hurt not because you lost your only chance, but because you had attached your sense of future to one person. That is painful to admit, but it gives you your power back. Because if the story was built by the mind, it can be examined by the mind. If it was strengthened by repetition, it can be weakened by awareness. The next time your thoughts try to turn absence into humiliation, or silence into proof, or rejection into identity, pause before you believe them. Let the facts remain facts. Let the unknown remain unknown. Do not rush to punish yourself just because the story feels unfinished. You do not need to explain everything in the cruelest possible way. Sometimes the most mature thing you can say is, "This hurt me, but I will not use it to destroy myself." There is strength in that sentence. It allows you to grieve without collapsing into shame. It allows you to learn without turning yourself into the enemy. It allows you to accept that someone's place in your life may be over without making their departure the definition of who you are. Reality may hurt, but the story your mind writes can hurt even more if you never question it. So separate them. What happened is one thing. What you decided it means about you is another. And your freedom begins the moment you stop treating your wounded interpretation as absolute truth. 4. Accept that closure may never come from them. One of the hardest things to release is not the person. It is the imagined conversation where they finally understand what they did to you. You picture them becoming honest. You picture them explaining why they changed, why they became cold, why they left, why they could not love you the way you needed. You imagine an apology that feels clean enough to end the confusion. A sentence that finally settles the pain. A moment where they look at you and say, in some form, "You were not wrong to feel what you felt." And because that imagined moment feels so healing, part of you begins to believe you cannot move on without it. This is where closure becomes dangerous. Closure itself is not wrong. A mature conversation can bring peace. A sincere apology can soften something in the heart. There are endings that become easier to carry because both people were honest enough to face what happened. But not everyone is capable of that kind of honesty. And if your healing depends on someone else becoming honest, humble, self-aware, or emotionally responsible, then your peace is no longer in your hands. It is in theirs. Ancient wisdom would bring you back to a simple but uncomfortable truth. You do not control what another person is willing to see. You do not control whether they admit their part. You do not control whether they regret losing you. You do not control whether they ever explain themselves in a way that feels fair. And if your freedom depends on what you cannot control, your freedom will always remain fragile. This is painful because the mind wants the ending to make sense. It wants the emotional math to balance. If you loved deeply, the mind wants proof that it mattered. If you were hurt, the mind wants the person who hurt you to name the wound. If you were confused, the mind wants the one who confused you to come back with clarity. But real life does not always give clean endings. Sometimes people leave with silence. Sometimes they give excuses instead of truth. Sometimes they rewrite the story because facing it honestly would threaten their image of themselves. Sometimes they avoid the conversation, not because you do not deserve it, but because they do not have the courage to stand inside what they caused. That distinction matters. Their inability to give closure does not mean your pain was imaginary. Their silence does not mean you are asking for too much. Their refusal to explain does not mean there is nothing to explain. It may simply mean they are limited in the exact place where you needed maturity. And that is a brutal thing to accept. Because part of you may still believe that if you could just ask the right question, send the right message, choose the right tone, or wait for the right time, they would finally give you the answer that sets you free. But sometimes the person who confused you cannot be the person who makes you clear. Sometimes the person who avoided responsibility during the connection will not suddenly become brave at the ending. You can spend months waiting for emotional maturity to appear in someone who has already shown you its limits. This is why you must learn to read behavior as information, not with bitterness, not with drama, just with clear eyes. If they avoid honest conversation, that tells you something. If they disappear when accountability is required, that tells you something. If they only return when they want comfort, attention, or access, but never when truth is needed, that tells you something too. It may not be the answer you wanted, but it is still an answer. Modern psychology tells us the brain seeks completion. An unfinished emotional experience keeps asking to be resolved. That is why you replay the ending. That is why you imagine what you would say. That is why you keep returning to the last message, the last meeting, the last shift in their behavior. Your mind is trying to close a loop. But not every loop closes through another person. Some loops close when you stop needing the person who hurt you to validate that you were hurt. They close when you begin to trust your own experience without demanding a confession from them. They close when you can say, "I may never know the full truth, but I know how this affected me. I know what it did to my peace. I know what version of myself I became while waiting for them." That is enough to begin. Not enough to make it painless. Enough to stop surrendering your life to the hope of a perfect explanation. There is a quiet kind of self-respect in accepting an incomplete ending. It does not mean you approve of what happened. It does not mean you pretend the silence was kind. It means you stop standing at a locked door, asking it to become a home. You begin to understand that closure may arrive as recognition, not conversation. You recognize that they could not meet you with the care you needed. You recognize that you were attached not only to who they were, but to who you hoped they would become. You recognize that you do not need to turn them into a villain to admit that the connection was hurting you. And slowly, instead of waiting for them to explain your pain, you start telling yourself the truth with tenderness and discipline. That is a different kind of closure. It is not dramatic. It does not come with a final scene. It does not always feel satisfying at first, but it gives your power back because it no longer asks someone else to unlock the next chapter of your life. A person can matter deeply and still be unable to give you peace. A connection can be real and still be wrong for your nervous system. Someone can have loved you in their limited way and still have failed to love you in a way that was safe, steady, and mature. Accepting this is not easy. The mind wants clear categories. It wants them to be either good or bad, loving or cruel, sincere or false. But people are often more complicated than that. Someone can care and still harm. Someone can miss you and still not choose you. Someone can feel something and still lack the character to build anything healthy with it. When you accept this, the question changes. Instead of asking, Did they care? You begin asking, was this good for me? Instead of asking, will they regret it? You ask, what am I becoming while I wait? Instead of asking, why did they do this? You ask, what is reality asking me to stop denying? Those are harder questions, but they lead somewhere. The need for closure often hides a deeper need, the need to feel that your love was not wasted. But love is not wasted simply because someone could not honor it. Love reveals you. It shows your capacity, your tenderness, your loyalty, your hope. The mistake is not that you loved. The mistake is letting one person's inability to receive that love convince you that your heart became foolish for offering it. You can take the lesson without carrying the humiliation. So if the apology never comes, let your dignity become the apology you give yourself. If the explanation never comes, let reality explain what their words refuse to say. If the final conversation never happens, let your own clarity become the ending. Not because you deserved silence, but because you deserve freedom more than you deserve a perfect answer. That is the lesson. Accept that closure may never come from them. Some doors close without a speech, without justice, without one last honest moment. And sometimes healing begins when you stop waiting outside that door and finally walk back into your own life. 5. Stop romanticizing the pain. One of the most dangerous things the mind can do after losing someone is turn suffering into proof of love. You miss them, so the mind says they must have been special. You ache for them, so the mind says the connection must have been rare. You cannot stop thinking about them, so the mind says this must mean something deeper than an ordinary attachment. And slowly, pain begins to look like evidence. But pain is not always proof that someone belonged in your life. Sometimes pain is proof that your nervous system became attached to intensity. Sometimes it means you were living between hope and disappointment for so long that the emotional highs began to feel like love, and the lows began to feel like sacrifice. Sometimes you are not missing the whole person. You are missing the version of them your mind keeps editing into something softer, safer, and more beautiful than reality ever was. This is where romanticizing becomes dangerous. The mind has a way of polishing the past when the present feels empty. It removes the coldness, the confusion, the anxiety, the waiting, the moments when you felt small, the times you had to guess where you stood. Then it keeps the beautiful parts, the late conversations, the rare tenderness, the way they looked at you once, the feeling that maybe this could become something real. And because the highlight reel is emotionally powerful, you begin to grieve a version of the relationship that may not have fully existed. That does not mean the good moments were fake. They may have been real. The connection may have had warmth, depth, chemistry, and meaning. But a few beautiful moments do not erase the pattern that hurt you. A person is not only who they were when they made you feel chosen, they are also who they were when you needed steadiness, honesty, care, and clarity. This is the part attachment does not want to remember. Attachment prefers the peak. It remembers the message that made your chest open, not the silence that followed. It remembers the apology, not the repeated behavior. It remembers how alive you felt around them, not how anxious you became when their energy changed. It remembers the promise, not the pattern. And if you are not careful, you will start missing the emotional high more than the actual relationship. Modern psychology has a name for part of this: intermittent reinforcement. When care is inconsistent, the mind can become more attached, not less. The unpredictable reward becomes addictive. You do not know when affection will return, so you wait harder. You analyze more. You become more sensitive to small signs. A simple message feels like relief because it ends the anxiety for a moment. Then the distance comes back and the craving begins again. This is why some connections feel impossible to release, even when they were not peaceful. They trained your nervous system to confuse relief with love. After days of uncertainty, one warm moment feels powerful enough to make you forget how much the uncertainty cost you. But relief from pain is not the same as safety. A person who keeps hurting you and then comforting you can become emotionally unforgettable, not because the love is healthy, but because the cycle is intense. This is why you must stop worshipping the ache. Missing them does not automatically mean they were right for you. Thinking about them at night does not mean you should go back. Feeling broken after losing them does not mean they were your destiny. Sometimes it only means your body is withdrawing from a pattern it learned too well. Buddhism is useful here because it separates love from craving. Love can be spacious. Love can want the good of another person without destroying the self. Craving is different. Craving tightens. It reaches. It says, "I cannot be okay unless I have this." It turns a person into medicine, then panics when the medicine is gone. That is not freedom. That is dependence. To stop romanticizing the pain, you have to become more honest with the full memory. Not cruel, not bitter, just whole. When your mind shows you the beautiful moment, remember the cost around it. When it shows you the tenderness, remember whether tenderness was consistent or rare. When it shows you what they could have been, remember what they actually chose to be. This is not about demonizing them. Demonizing is still attachment. It keeps the person central, just in a darker way. The goal is not to make them evil so you can survive the loss. The goal is to make the memory accurate enough that you stop suffering for an illusion, because the mind can grieve potential more intensely than reality. You may not be attached only to what happened. You may be attached to what almost happened, the almost relationship, the almost apology, the almost future, the almost version of them who was finally ready, finally honest, finally steady, finally able to love you without confusion. Almost can keep a person trapped for a long time, but almost is not a place to live. If something was real, honor it. If it hurt, admit it. If it taught you something, take the lesson. But do not turn your pain into a temple. Do not keep returning to suffering because it makes the connection feel alive. Do not assume that the depth of your grief proves the depth of their love. Sometimes grief is deep because you abandoned yourself for too long. That is a hard truth, but it is also a doorway back to dignity. You begin to see that part of what you are mourning is not only the person, but the version of yourself who kept waiting, hoping, forgiving, explaining, and shrinking. You're mourning the time you spent trying to make uncertainty feel like devotion. You're mourning the energy you gave to someone's potential while your own life stood quietly in the background. And once you see this clearly, the pain changes shape. It is no longer a sacred sign that you must return. It becomes information. It tells you where you were hungry, where you were vulnerable, where you confused intensity with intimacy, where you accepted emotional crumbs because the rare moments of warmth felt like a feast. That awareness does not make you weak. It makes you awake. The next time your mind begins to make the past beautiful, do not argue violently with it. Just complete the picture. Let the good exist, but place it beside the truth. Yes, there was connection, and there was confusion. Yes, there were moments that felt real, and there were patterns that made you lose peace. Yes, you cared, and caring did not make the relationship healthy. This is emotional maturity. the ability to hold the whole truth without running to either fantasy or hatred. You do not need to erase the beautiful parts. You only need to stop letting them excuse the painful ones. That is the lesson. Stop romanticizing the pain. It may feel meaningful because it is intense, but not everything intense is sacred. Sometimes peace feels quieter than passion because peace is not trying to hook your nervous system. And one day, when you're healed enough to see clearly, you may realize you were not losing love. You were being released from a cycle that only felt like love when it stopped hurting for a moment. 6. Use distance as medicine, not punishment. Distance is often misunderstood when the heart is still attached. At first, it can feel like cruelty, like you're trying to prove a point, like you are punishing them or punishing yourself by stepping back. And because part of you still cares, distance can feel almost unnatural. You wonder if silence makes you cold. You wonder if removing access means you are being dramatic. You wonder if protecting yourself means you have stopped being kind. But distance is not always rejection. Sometimes distance is the only environment where healing can begin. When you are emotionally tied to someone, closeness keeps the wound active. Every message, every small sign, every accidental reminder, every moment of uncertainty can restart the same inner storm. You may tell yourself you are strong enough to stay near them, to keep the conversation open, to remain friendly, to watch from a distance without being affected. But if every form of access pulls you back into longing, analysis, or hope, then access is no longer harmless. It is keeping the attachment alive. This is why distance has to be understood as medicine, not punishment. Medicine is not always pleasant. Sometimes it tastes bitter. Sometimes it removes what you still want. Sometimes it asks you to tolerate discomfort before you feel relief. But its purpose is not to hurt you. Its purpose is to help the body stop fighting the same injury every day. The same is true emotionally. If a person's presence keeps you anxious, if their inconsistency keeps you waiting, if their name on your screen changes your whole nervous system, then distance is not immaturity, it is wisdom. It is the quiet recognition that your peace needs space to recover before your heart can see clearly again. Ancient wisdom often speaks about self-command, but self-command does not mean standing in the middle of temptation and pretending you are unaffected. Real discipline includes knowing your limits. A person who is healing does not need to prove they can keep touching the fire. They need to learn how to stop reaching for it. That is not weakness. That is intelligence. Many people stay close because they fear what distance will reveal. They fear that if they stop reaching out, the other person will not come. They fear that if they remove access, the connection will finally die. They fear that if they stop checking, stop replying, stop making themselves emotionally available, they will have to face the truth they have been avoiding. But sometimes that truth is exactly what saves you. If the connection only survives because you keep chasing it, then distance reveals the imbalance. If the person only returns when you disappear, distance reveals the pattern. If your peace improves when they are not near your attention, distance reveals what your heart was too attached to admit. And yes, that can hurt. But not all hurt is harm. Some hurt is withdrawal. Some hurt is the body releasing a dependency. Some hurt is the soul adjusting to the absence of what once controlled it. When you stop giving instant access to someone you're attached to, you may feel panic at first. You may feel empty. You may feel tempted to go back just to relieve the discomfort. That does not mean distance is wrong. It means the bond had become stronger than your peace. This is where you need to be very honest. Are you keeping contact because it is healthy, or because you are afraid of the silence that comes without it? Are you staying available because it reflects love, or because part of you still hopes that if you remain close enough, they will finally choose you correctly? There is a difference between love and emotional waiting. Love can be calm, even when it is sad. Waiting keeps scanning for signs. Love accepts reality. Waiting keeps negotiating with it. Love can bless someone and still walk away. Waiting keeps a secret door open, just in case the old hope returns. Distance closes that door, not because you hate them, but because you are done living in the hallway. And this is important. Distance does not have to be loud. You do not need to announce your healing like a performance. You do not need to send a final speech just to prove you are done. You do not need to make them feel guilty, so your silence feels justified. Sometimes the most powerful distance is quiet. You simply stop participating in what keeps you wounded. You answer less, or not at all. You stop offering emotional access to someone who handles it carelessly. You remove yourself from situations where your healing keeps getting interrupted. You stop explaining your boundary to someone who benefits from you not having one. That is not revenge. That is recovery. Modern psychology understands the importance of environment. A habit is harder to break when the cues remain everywhere. If the cue is their profile, their messages, their voice, their unpredictable attention, then your mind will keep reacting. You cannot expect your nervous system to calm down while you keep placing it in the same conditions that trained it to be anxious. So change the conditions. Give yourself space where they are not the center. Space where your thoughts can settle. Space where your body can stop preparing for a message. Space where your day is no longer shaped by whether they appeared or disappeared. Space where you can remember what your own energy feels like without being interrupted by their absence. At first, distance may feel empty because so much of your attention was organized around them. But emptiness is not always a bad sign. Sometimes emptiness is what remains when chaos leaves. It feels strange because your mind is used to noise. It is used to hoping, checking, interpreting, reacting. When that noise fades, peace may not feel like peace immediately. It may feel like boredom, loneliness, or loss. Stay there long enough. The nervous system needs time to learn that calm is safe. The heart needs time to stop confusing intensity with connection. The mind needs time to stop treating silence as danger. Distance gives all of this a chance to happen. And one day, something subtle begins to shift. You do not reach for the phone as quickly. You do not measure your day by their response. You do not feel the same pull to explain yourself, prove yourself, or be seen by them. You start noticing your own life again, not as a distraction from them, but as something real that has been waiting for your return. That is what distance is for. Not to make them suffer, not to make them regret, not to manipulate them into noticing your absence. If your distance is still designed to affect them, then they are still the center. True distance is not about controlling their reaction. It is about reclaiming your direction. This is the lesson. Use distance as medicine, not punishment. Step back because your mind needs air. Step back because your heart needs silence. Step back because you cannot heal in the same space where you keep reopening the wound. And if they misunderstand your distance, let them. Your healing does not need to be explained to the person who made distance necessary. 7. Reclaim the time they still occupy in your mind. There is a quiet theft that happens after someone leaves. They may no longer be taking your calls, your affection, your energy, or your plans. but they are still taking something more invisible. Your time, not the time you spend with them, because that part may already be over. The time they take now is mental time, emotional time. The hours you spend replaying, wondering, checking, imagining, hoping, regretting, and trying to understand what may never become clear. And because this happens privately, it is easy to underestimate. No one sees the 10 minutes you lose staring at your phone. No one sees the hour you spend lying awake, rebuilding conversations that already happened. No one sees how often your attention leaves the room, leaves your work, leaves your own life, and returns to someone who is not even there. But your life feels it. Your focus becomes thinner. Your energy becomes divided. Your days lose a certain sharpness because part of you is always elsewhere. You may still be functioning. You may still be working, speaking, smiling, answering messages, doing what needs to be done. But inwardly, a portion of your life remains tied to the past. This is why reclaiming time is not only about being productive, it is about taking back possession of your own existence. Seneca wrote often about how easily people guard their money while wasting their time, and that insight becomes even more painful when applied to attachment. You may refuse to give this person another chance. You may refuse to text them. You may refuse to appear desperate. But if they still receive 3 hours of your attention every day inside your mind, then something in you is still paying them. Not with money, with life. That is the part you must be brave enough to see. Every hour spent replaying them is an hour not spent becoming clearer, stronger, healthier, more grounded, more alive. Every emotional detour has a cost. It takes from the book you did not read, the body you did not care for, the work you did not deepen, the friend you did not fully hear, the silence you did not enjoy, the future you did not build. And this does not mean you should shame yourself for grieving. Grief needs time. Healing needs space. The heart cannot be commanded like a machine, but there is a difference between giving grief its rightful place and letting grief take over the whole house. At some point, you have to ask a serious question. How much more of my life am I willing to give to someone's absence? Not as a dramatic question, as a practical one. Because attachment often survives by hiding inside unstructured time. The empty evening, the quiet night, the morning before your day begins, the space between tasks, the moment when nothing demands your attention and the mind drifts toward the familiar wound. This is why you do not reclaim your mind only by thinking differently. You reclaim it by living differently. You need places for your attention to go, real places, concrete places, a walk, a project, a skill, a cleaner room, a stronger body, a conversation with someone who is actually present, a small promise kept to yourself. The mind cannot simply be told to stop returning to the past. It must be given a life worth returning to. That is not distraction. That is reconstruction. Distraction is when you run from pain because you are afraid to feel it. Reconstruction is when you build enough life around the pain that it no longer becomes the center. You are not pretending the person never mattered. You're teaching your attention that other things matter too. And at first, those other things may feel dull. This is normal. When your nervous system has been trained by emotional intensity, ordinary life can seem quiet, even flat. Work may feel boring, peace may feel empty. Healthy routines may feel less powerful than the drama of longing. But this does not mean your life is meaningless without them. It means your system is adjusting after being overstimulated by uncertainty, hope, fear, and emotional highs. Calm has to be relearned. So do not wait until you feel inspired to reclaim your time. Begin before the feeling arrives. Make the next hour belong to you, even if your mind still wanders. Do something that strengthens your future, even if your heart is not fully in it yet. Move your body. Clean something. Write honestly. Create something. Study. Rest properly. Return to simple order. The point is not that these actions magically erase the person. The point is that they break the spell of helplessness. When you act, you remind yourself that you are not only someone who misses, you are someone who can choose. You are someone who can begin again in small ways. You are someone whose life is still asking to be lived, even with a tender heart. This is where self-respect becomes visible. Self-respect is not only a feeling, it is often a schedule. It is what you do with your morning when your mind wants to check. It is what you do at night when the old sadness comes. It is the decision to stop giving your best attention to someone who is no longer building anything with you. Your attention is one of the most sacred things you have. It shapes what you become. If you keep placing it on loss, you become organized around loss. If you keep placing it on absence, absence becomes the center of your identity. But if you begin placing it again and again on your own growth, your own peace, your own responsibilities, your own future, then slowly your life starts to gather around you again. Not all at once, but enough to feel the difference. A useful question is not, how do I stop thinking about them forever? That question creates pressure and usually fails. A better question is, what deserves my attention right now? This brings you back to the present without turning healing into a fight. Maybe your work deserves it. Maybe your body deserves it. Maybe your family deserves it. Maybe your home deserves it. Maybe your future self deserves it. Maybe the part of you that has been neglected while you were emotionally orbiting someone else deserves it most of all. When you ask the question this way, you begin to understand that attention is not just something that happens to you. It is something you can train. Musashi, in his own severe way, understood the power of directing the mind fully toward the path in front of you, not scattering yourself, not living half in one world and half in another. Mastery requires presence, and emotional mastery is no different. You cannot build a new life while donating your attention to an old wound every few hours. You have to gather yourself. This does not mean you will never think of them. You will, but the goal is not perfect mental silence. The goal is to stop letting every thought become a withdrawal from your own life. A memory can appear while you continue walking. A feeling can rise while you continue building. A wave of sadness can pass through without taking the whole day with it. That is how time returns to you. 1 hour at a time, one choice at a time. One moment where you notice the pull and decide not to give it everything. Eventually the mind begins to understand. This person is not the center anymore. This memory is not the daily ritual anymore. This absence is not the organizing principle of my life anymore. And when that happens, you do not just get over someone, you get yourself back. That is the lesson. Reclaim the time they still occupy in your mind. Not because you never loved them, and not because the pain should disappear on command, but because your life is too valuable to be spent worshipping what is no longer here. The past may ask for your attention, but your future needs it more. 8. Train your mind to return when it wanders back to them. Healing does not mean your mind never goes back to them. This is important because many people misunderstand recovery. They think healing should feel like total silence, no memories, no longing, no sudden ache, no old thought appearing while they are trying to live their day. So when the person returns to their mind, they panic. They believe they have failed. They think all their progress was fake. But that is not how the mind heals. The mind returns to what carried emotional weight. It returns to what was unfinished, familiar, painful, or meaningful. A memory can appear even after you have made the right decision. A feeling can rise even when you know the relationship was not good for your peace. You can miss someone and still know they are not where you belong. The goal is not to never think of them again. The goal is to stop following the thought every time it appears. That difference changes everything. If the thought comes and you immediately enter the old story, you are back in the loop. But if the thought comes and you notice it, breathe, and return to your life, you are training freedom. You are teaching the mind that the memory can pass through without becoming your master. This is the deeper work. At first, the return may feel small and almost invisible. You are working, then their name appears. You are driving, then a scene from the past rises. You are about to sleep, then your mind opens the old file. In that moment, the familiar pull begins. The mind wants to go deeper. It wants to replay, analyze, imagine, compare, regret, or hope. This is the exact moment where training begins. Not when you feel strong, not when you are perfectly calm, not when you have no desire to look back. Training begins when the old path opens and you choose not to walk all the way down it. You do not need to attack the thought. You do not need to curse yourself for having it. You do not need to prove that you are over them. The more aggressively you fight a thought, the more important it becomes inside the mind. A calmer response is more powerful. This is a memory. This is an old attachment. This is my mind returning to something familiar. Then you come back to the breath, back to the body, back to the room, back to the task in front of you, back to the next honest action. Nothing dramatic, nothing mystical, just a quiet return. This is why mindfulness matters, not as a soft idea, but as a practical discipline. The Buddha's teaching on the wandering mind was not about becoming empty or emotionless. It was about seeing clearly. A thought arises, a feeling arises, a craving arises. You notice it without becoming it. You allow it to move without building an identity around it. That is a skill. And like every skill, it strengthens through repetition. The first time you return, it may feel useless. The thought may come back 5 minutes later, then again at night, then again the next morning. But this doesn't mean the practice is failing. It means the pathway is still strong. The mind has repeated the old route many times, so of course it knows how to find it. You are not weak because the path exists. You are healing because you are no longer walking it automatically. Modern neuroscience would describe this in simple terms. The brain strengthens what it repeats. If you repeat checking, replaying, imagining, and longing, those patterns become easier to activate. But if you repeat noticing, pausing, returning, and redirecting your attention, a new pattern begins to form. Slowly, the mind learns a different response, not overnight, but steadily. This is where many people quit too early. They expect one strong decision to erase a deeply practiced attachment. They say, "I decided to move on, so why am I still thinking about them?" But the mind is not changed by one decision alone. It is changed by repeated decisions, made in ordinary moments, especially when the old emotion is still present. You may still feel the pull and choose not to obey it. That is strength. A person with no urge is not practicing discipline. Discipline appears when the urge is there, and you remain loyal to the direction you have chosen. Not perfectly, not without discomfort, but enough times that the mind begins to trust you again. So when your mind wanders back to them, do not turn it into a tragedy. Treat it like training. You noticed, that is already progress. Now return. Return to what is real. Return to what can be touched, shaped, improved, protected. Your health, your work, your prayer, your home, your body, your future, your character, the people who are present, the responsibilities that still belong to you. The old attachment wants your attention because attention keeps it alive. Your life needs your attention because attention is how you rebuild it. And this return must be gentle but firm. Gentle because shame keeps the wound active. If every thought of them becomes an opportunity to attack yourself, you create more suffering. You start feeling pain not only because of the memory, but because you are angry at yourself for remembering. That becomes another loop. Firm, because gentleness without direction becomes indulgence. You cannot say, "I am being kind to myself," while spending 3 more hours inside the same fantasy. Real kindness does not feed what weakens you. It guides you back without violence. There is a simple sentence that can help. I can feel this without following it. That sentence is mature. It does not deny the emotion. It does not pretend you are unaffected. It simply separates feeling from obedience. You can feel sadness without reopening the conversation. You can feel longing without checking their page. You can feel curiosity without turning it into investigation. You can feel love without handing your whole mind back to the past. This is emotional freedom in its early form. Not the absence of feeling, but the ability to remain yourself while feeling. The Stoics cared deeply about this kind of inner separation. They understood that impressions arrive before permission. Something strikes the mind, a memory, an image, a fear, a desire. But after the impression comes the question of assent. Do you agree with it? Do you follow it? Do you build your behavior around it? A thought may say, "You need them." But you do not have to agree. A memory may say, "Go back." But you do not have to move. An old feeling may say, "This is love." But you can answer with clearer eyes. Maybe this is attachment. Maybe this is habit. Maybe this is pain looking for relief. That kind of inner dialogue is not weakness. It is consciousness returning. At first, it may feel like you are returning 100 times a day. That is fine. Return 100 times. Every return is a small act of self-respect. Every return interrupts the old loyalty to suffering. Every return reminds the mind that it does not have to live under the rule of one name. Eventually, the space grows. The thought comes, but it leaves faster. The memory appears, but it does not take the whole afternoon. The longing rises, but you no longer treat it as an emergency. You begin to understand that emotions can be intense without being instructions. They can be loud without being wise. And one day, you notice something quietly beautiful. You still remember, but you are not captured. That is healing. Not a dramatic moment where the past disappears. More often, healing is ordinary. You think of them, then continue your day. You remember something, then return to your breath. You feel a small ache, but you do not turn it into a story. The person who once occupied your whole inner world becomes a passing weather inside a much larger sky. That larger sky is you. That is the lesson. Train your mind to return when it wanders back to them. Do not measure healing by whether the thought appears. Measure it by what you do next. The memory may visit, but it no longer has to lead. And every time you return to yourself, you prove something quiet and powerful. You are no longer a prisoner of where your mind has been. 9. Stop making their absence the center of your identity. One of the deepest dangers of attachment is that, after someone leaves, you may begin to organize your whole identity around the fact that they are gone. At first, it looks like grief. You miss them, you remember them, you feel the empty space where their presence used to be. That is human. When someone mattered, their absence is not just an idea. It is felt in the body, in the daily rhythm, in the small moments where you still expect them to be there. But grief becomes more dangerous when it quietly turns into identity. You stop being a person who experienced loss, and you begin to see yourself as the person who was left, the person who was not chosen, the person who was misunderstood, the person who gave too much, the person who keeps getting hurt, the person who cannot move on. And once pain becomes identity, healing feels like losing yourself. This is why some people unconsciously hold on to suffering, not because they enjoy it, but because the suffering has become familiar. It gives them a role, it gives them a story, it gives them something to explain who they are now. Without it, they would have to face a more frightening question. Who am I if I am no longer defined by what happened to me? That question is uncomfortable, but it is also the beginning of freedom. Because you are not only the person they left, ignored, disappointed, or failed to understand. You are not only the person who waited. You are not only the person who cared too much for someone who could not meet you with the same steadiness. Those things may be part of your story, but they are not the whole of your being. There is still a life inside you that has not been fully lived. This is where many people make the mistake of shrinking their future to the size of one wound. They stop imagining new versions of themselves because the old pain keeps demanding attention. They stop growing because part of them is still waiting for the past to return and approve of who they become. They carry the absence like a name tag, as if every room they enter must know, I am someone who was hurt. But pain is not meant to become your permanent introduction. It is meant to teach you, deepen you, sharpen your vision, and then slowly take its proper place behind you. Not erased, not denied, just no longer sitting on the throne. Jung understood that people can become trapped inside a narrow story about themselves. A wound can become a mask. A rejection can become a personality. A betrayal can become a worldview. And once that happens, you stop meeting life as it is. You meet life through the old injury. You assume people will leave before they even know you. You expect disappointment before love has a chance to become real. You protect yourself so much that you begin living like the future has already been proven guilty by the past. That is not wisdom. That is fear wearing armor. Of course you may need protection for a while. After emotional pain, the heart does not open easily. It should not open carelessly. But there is a difference between learning discernment and building a prison. Discernment says, I will see people clearly. A prison says, I will never trust life again. Discernment makes you stronger. A prison makes the wound your ruler. And this is why you must be careful with the sentences you repeat about yourself. I always get abandoned. I am too much. I am never chosen. I cannot love again. I lose myself every time. These may feel true in moments of pain, but if you repeat them long enough, they become instructions. The mind begins to look for evidence. The body begins to expect the same ending. You begin entering new situations with an old conclusion already written inside you. A painful experience should not become a prophecy. You can say, "I was hurt," without saying, "I am broken." You can say, "I lost someone," without saying, "I lost myself forever." You can say, "This changed me," without allowing it to reduce you. That distinction matters because the language you use inside yourself becomes the atmosphere you live in. If all your inner language is built around loss, you will keep feeling like life is happening after the best part has already passed. But that is not true. The best part of your life is not automatically behind you because one person is behind you. That may sound simple, but when attachment is strong, the mind resists it. It wants to believe that this person was the peak, the proof, the final chance, the only door into the life you wanted. But often, what you are really missing is not only them. You are missing who you were when you still believed certain things were possible. So the work is not only to let go of them, it is to reclaim the part of you that became tied to them, the part that hoped, the part that felt alive, the part that wanted beauty, closeness, tenderness, meaning. Do not bury that part just because someone failed to honor it. Do not decide that your capacity to love was a mistake because one person did not know how to receive it well. Your depth is not the problem. Your loyalty is not the problem. Your tenderness is not the problem. The lesson is not to become less human. The lesson is to become more conscious about where you place the most sacred parts of yourself. That is maturity. You do not heal by becoming empty. You heal by becoming whole again. You gather back the energy that was scattered across old messages, imagined endings, and unanswered questions. You begin to ask what kind of person this pain is asking you to become. Not bitter, not closed, not desperate to prove anything, but clearer, more grounded, more loyal to your own life. This is where absence loses its power, not when you forget them completely, but when their absence stops being the main fact about you. You begin to remember other truths. You are someone with work to do. You are someone with a body to care for. You are someone with gifts, responsibilities, friendships, curiosity, discipline, and a future that still requires your participation. You are still becoming, and becoming requires movement. It requires you to stop using the past as a mirror every time you want to know who you are. It requires you to build evidence that you are more than the wound. Small evidence at first. Keeping a promise to yourself, returning to a routine, finishing something, resting properly, learning something new, choosing not to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. These things may not feel dramatic, but they rebuild identity, because identity is not only what happened to you, it is what you repeatedly choose after it happened. If you repeatedly choose the old story remains alive. If you repeatedly choose your own growth, something stronger begins to form. A self that can remember without collapsing. A self that can love without disappearing. A self that can lose someone without losing its center. That is the person you are trying to become. So do not make their absence the center of your identity. Let it be a chapter that taught you where you were too attached, where you were too hungry for reassurance, where you ignored your own needs, where you confused being wanted with being safe. Learn from it deeply, but do not kneel before it forever. You are not only what hurt you, you are also what survived it. You are what you choose next. You are the discipline you build after the disappointment. You are the peace you protect after the chaos. You are the self-respect that rises when you finally stop asking someone else's absence to explain your worth. That is the lesson. Stop making their absence the center of your identity. They may have been part of your life, but they are not the author of your life. And the next version of you cannot be built while the old wound is still being treated like your name. 10. Let them become a chapter, not the whole book. There comes a point where healing is no longer about understanding them. It becomes about refusing to let one chapter keep writing the rest of your life. This is difficult because some people do not pass through us lightly. They leave marks. They change the way we think, the way we love, the way we protect ourselves, the way we question our own judgment. Some connections become emotional turning points, not because they lasted forever, but because they reached a place inside us that ordinary experiences never touched. So when they are gone, it can feel wrong to reduce them to just a chapter. The heart may resist that. It may say, but they meant more than that. And maybe they did. Maybe they mattered deeply. Maybe they awakened tenderness, longing, hope, vulnerability, or pain you did not know you could feel. Maybe the connection changed you in ways you still cannot fully explain. But a chapter can be meaningful without becoming the whole book. That is the distinction. You do not have to make them insignificant in order to move on. You do not have to pretend the memories meant nothing. You do not have to insult the past just to prove you are strong. Real healing does not need false contempt. It needs proportion. It needs the ability to say, this mattered, without saying, this defines everything. Because when one person becomes the whole book, your life begins to shrink around them. Every future possibility is compared to them. Every new person is measured against them. Every quiet moment becomes a doorway back to them. Even your growth becomes connected to them, as if you are only improving so they might one day see what they lost. That is still captivity. Freedom begins when your growth is no longer a message to them. You do not become stronger to make them regret leaving. You do not rebuild yourself so they can imagine you differently. You do not heal as a performance for someone who may never understand the full cost of what happened. You heal because your life deserves to continue with dignity, whether they notice or not. This is where self-mastery becomes very clean. You stop asking the past to give you permission to enter the future. You stop needing the old story to become fair before you allow yourself to live again. You stop treating one ending as the final verdict on your capacity to love, trust, create, and become. A chapter can hold beauty and still be over. It can hold pain and still be useful. It can contain lessons you needed, warnings you ignored, tenderness you will never deny, and mistakes you will never repeat. But it cannot be allowed to sit in the place where your future belongs. This is not easy, because the mind often confuses letting go with betrayal. It feels as if moving forward means the connection was not real. But that is not true. You can honor what was real without carrying it forever in the center of your chest. You can remember someone with calmness instead of craving. You can wish them well without wanting access. You can let the past keep its meaning without letting it keep your life. There is a quiet maturity in that. Nietzsche wrote often about becoming, about the difficult work of transforming pain into strength rather than resentment. That idea matters here. If you cannot turn the experience into wisdom, it turns into bitterness. If you cannot give the chapter its proper place, it becomes a chain. The goal is not to deny the wound. The goal is to make sure the wound does not become your philosophy of life. Because one person's inability to love you well should not become your explanation for the entire world. Do not let one ending make you suspicious of every beginning. Do not let one inconsistent person convince you that steadiness does not exist. Do not let one painful attachment teach you to call numbness wisdom. If you do, the chapter continues, not because they are still present, but because their impact keeps shaping the way you meet life. That is why letting them become a chapter is not passive. It is an active act of inner organization. You are deciding where this experience belongs inside you, not erased, not worshipped, not denied, placed. It belongs behind you as a teacher, not above you as a ruler. And what did it teach you? Maybe it taught you that chemistry is not the same as compatibility. Maybe it taught you that longing is not always love. Maybe it taught you that your peace should not depend on someone's mood, attention, apology, or return. Maybe it taught you that you can survive the silence you once feared. Let the lesson stay. Let the obsession leave. That is the balance. If you erase everything, you lose the wisdom. If you keep everything alive, you lose yourself. Healing is learning how to carry the lesson without carrying the attachment. It is being able to say, I understand more now, without needing to reopen the wound to prove it. And eventually, the person becomes part of your story in a quieter way. Their name no longer shakes the whole room inside you. The memories no longer arrive with the same urgency. The unanswered questions lose their authority. You may still remember, but remembering no longer means returning. That is when you know the chapter has found its place. Not because you hate them, not because you forgot them, not because everything makes perfect sense now, but because your life has become larger than the part where they disappeared. This is the final lesson. Let them become a chapter, not the whole book. They may have mattered deeply, but they do not get to define the rest of your life. The story is still moving. There are pages ahead that have nothing to do with their absence. There is strength in you that this pain has not destroyed. There is peace available to you that does not require their return. And perhaps the most powerful thing you can do now is not to force yourself to forget them, but to stop building your future around the memory of them. Close the chapter with honesty. Carry the lesson with dignity. Then turn the page as someone who finally understands that losing a person is painful, but losing yourself around them is the greater loss, and you are no longer willing to lose yourself. When you are trying to stop thinking about someone, the goal is not to become empty. The goal is not to erase every memory, deny every feeling, or pretend that a person who once mattered suddenly means nothing. That kind of healing is not real. It only creates another form of inattention, because the heart knows when it is being forced to lie. Real healing is quieter than that. It begins when you stop confusing the presence of a thought with the authority of that thought. Their name may still come up in your mind. A memory may still pass through you. A part of you may still wonder, still miss, still feel the old ache when life becomes quiet. But none of that means you have to return. None of that means you have failed. None of that means the past is calling you back into the same pattern. It only means you are human. What matters now is what you do with the memory when it arrives. Do you feed it, follow it, check for more, build another story around it, and let it take over your peace? Or do you see it clearly, breathe through the pull, and return to your own life with a little more discipline than before? That return is where your strength is built. Not in one dramatic moment, not in one perfect decision, but in the small, ordinary moments when the old wound asks for your attention, and you choose not to give it everything. You choose not to reopen the message. You choose not to study their life from a distance. You choose not to turn their silence into a verdict on your worth. You choose not to make their absence the center of your identity. And slowly, something inside you begins to change. The person who once occupied your whole inner world becomes smaller, not because they never mattered, but because your life becomes larger again. Your attention returns, your energy returns, your dignity returns. You begin to remember that you existed before this attachment, and you will continue becoming after it. This is not about hating them. Hatred is still a chain. It keeps the person close, just in a darker form. The deeper freedom is being able to say, "This mattered, this hurt, this taught me something, but it doesn't own me anymore." That is maturity. You do not need their apology to become whole. You do not need their regret to become valuable. You do not need their return to prove that what you felt was real. Your love was real because you felt it. Your pain was real because you carried it. And your healing becomes real when you stop asking the person who confused you to be the one who finally gives you peace. Some chapters end without fairness. Some doors close without explanation. Some people leave behind questions they will never be mature enough to answer. But your life cannot remain paused at the door of someone else's silence. At some point, you have to walk back into yourself, not as the person you were before. You may not become that person again. Pain changes people, but it does not have to make you bitter, desperate, or closed. It can make you clearer. It can teach you where you abandoned yourself, where you confused intensity with love, where you waited too long for someone's potential to become reality. And if you learn the lesson without letting the wound become your identity, then even this pain will not be wasted. So let them become a chapter. Let the memory lose its throne. Let the lesson remain, but let the obsession leave. The story is still moving, and there are parts of your life that cannot begin until you stop rereading the same page. If this episode helped you see your own situation more clearly, like the video and share it with someone who may need this reminder right now. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not chase, not explain, not check, not wait. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is return to yourself quietly and mean it.